and there are no UFO strikes. I can assure you, that's one vehicle that obeys a different law. What I want to talk about tonight is the spiritual approach to UFOs. I think it's generally accepted now by most people that UFOs exist. Opinion polls show that most people, I think there was a poll done a couple of years ago which showed that 9% of the people polled had actually seen one, which is almost 1 in 10 people. Well over 50% believed in them, and those who didn't. There are still a minority who don't, of course, and I believe we should be very tolerant of that minority. Having been in a minority in the past and not being treated with tolerance. I do remember going around the country in the 70s speaking on this and being heckled and ridiculed. And for Dr. King, for example, who was talking about it in the 50s, it must have been dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. But it didn't stop him. But it's great the tide has changed. People do accept it. If you talk about government cover-ups now, people say yes. What else is new? I mean, nobody believes much of governments anymore. They used to. I mean, he used to talk about government cover-ups in the 70s, and it was really regarded as a bit nutty. And now we know, as we'll get on to as the lecture proceeds, that they lied about UFOs, many of them, including the one in this country. But I think what people really are after, and I hope what you're after, because it's what I'm going to focus on tonight, is the deeper aspects of the subject. Why are they here? They have a very subtle plan, obviously, if you do believe in them, because they are here, they've been here for a long time, as I'll show, and yet they are allowing people to not, to question them, they aren't absolutely forcing people to believe, never mind coming down and landing and taking over the planet, which they could easily do. If they can get here for a start. And so there's a lot of very interesting questions, aren't there? Why are they here? Who are they? What is their plan? What's it all about? This is what I really want to focus on tonight, rather than what used to be called the nuts and bolts of the subject. I think it's moved on. I think everything has moved on, actually. I must say that the publisher of this book was very, very, I think, must be congratulated, actually, for basically going for a spiritual approach to UFOs, because it's quite difficult to get this sort of thing published by a commercial publisher, which this is. And they basically gave no limits or restrictions upon it. And they agreed that it would be a spiritual insight. That's the only basis that I didn't want to write yet another book. And there are quite a lot around about basic ufology and government cover-ups. You can get it on the internet. It's the deeper questions that really fascinate me, and I hope they fascinate you. So not only have people moved on in relation to UFOs, but I think people have moved on in relation to many things. And one thing is science. Now, I'm not a scientist. I put my hand right up right away. I'm not a physicist. We may have scientists. I know we do have some scientists in this audience, actually. At least one PhD in science in the audience. But it is very interesting, though, to look at the developments. And in researching this book, I was helped a lot by a woman called Hazel Courtney, who's a friend of mine, who's travelled the world interviewing some of the cutting-edge scientists in some of these fields, and it is fascinating where science is going, and I would say it's going towards the mystical. Very, very markedly indeed. If you take, for example, the whole approach to matter, to say one thing, it's astrophysicists, theoretical physicists state pretty well generally now that only 4% of matter in the universe is detectable, is visible, or detectable even. 96% is called invisible matter. That in itself is a mystical concept, although they may not regard it as such. And they don't know where that matter is, they just know it must exist. And it's broken into two categories, dark matter and dark energy. And dark matter is the matter which must exist because there isn't enough gravity in the universe from the bodies that have been identified. And without it, the universe, the galaxies would fall apart, the solar systems would separate, it wouldn't continue. So they know that's there, and they also know that the universe is expanding, and that requires a force which they can't detect, and that's dark energy. So that is 96% of the matter. I would say that is moving towards a metaphysical concept because it's not physically detected. Interestingly enough, I would say also straight away that Dr. King, who Vivian mentioned, who was my teacher and master, and I'll talk about him quite a bit tonight, when he lectured back in the 50s and early 60s, made a point which was very controversial at that time, which was that life on the other realms of this world, life after death if you like, those people in the heavenly spheres or the higher realms, life there was physical. I used to say this quite often. It's as physical, he'd say, as this. To them, it's just operating on a higher frequency. And that is really where science is moving now.